On a humid afternoon in West Palm Beach, a federal judge brought down the gavel on one of the most shocking events in modern American political history. We're going to break down the story of a failed assassination, the man, his bizarre motive, and a mission that came terrifyingly close to changing everything.
Just listen to those words from U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon. Deliberate and evil. This wasn't a judgment on some crime of passion or a momentary mistake. No, this was a flat-out condemnation of a calculated, months-long plan to commit the ultimate act of political violence.
And the sentence that followed? Just as absolute. Life in prison. So for Ryan Wesley Routh, that's the end of his story. But for us, that's where our story begins. To really understand how we got to this point, we have to rewind the clock. Back to the day it all went down.
So, picture this. It's September 15th, 2024. Former President Donald Trump is playing an unscheduled round of golf at his private club. But someone is watching. Someone who had been waiting for a very, very long time.
For nearly 12 hours, Ryan Routh had literally made a home for himself in a patch of shrubbery right along the perimeter fence. He turned a public tree line into his own personal sniper's nest, just waiting. I mean, this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. This was a siege.
And when you look at the gear he brought with him, man, it tells a chilling story of just how prepared he was. The SKS rifle, its serial number was completely filed off, a dead giveaway he knew he was committing a crime. He had food, he had water for the long haul. But the most disturbing items, 2 ceramic plates hung on the fence to act as a makeshift shield, and a GoPro camera mounted and ready to record and broadcast the assassination. He wanted the entire world to watch. So after all that planning, how did it all fall apart? You might be surprised. It wasn't some high-tech alarm system. It was the sharp eye of a single Secret Service agent who spotted the glint of that rifle barrel. The agent fired, Routh bolted, and what followed was a high-speed chase down Interstate 95. And when they finally caught him, the craziest part is witnesses said he was just eerily calm, like a man who had already accepted his fate.
So that's the what. But what about the who? I mean, who is Ryan Routh? How does a 58-year-old former construction worker from North Carolina wind up in the bushes with a rifle aimed at a former president? Well, the answer seems to lie in a bizarre journey that took him all the way to the war-torn streets of Ukraine.
You see, Routh kind of saw himself as this global fixer. When Russia invaded Ukraine, he saw his big chance. He traveled to Kiev, tried to recruit Afghan soldiers, but his grand plans crashed headfirst into a harsh reality. Ukrainian military sources basically dismissed him as delusional and a loose cannon. Here was a man desperately searching for a heroic purpose, but the world just wasn't buying it. So, rejected and without a war to fight, he came back to the U.S. with all that festering frustration, an energy that was about to find a new and much closer target. Back in the States, his radical ideas started to crystallize on the page. In a book he published himself, Routh wrote this chilling line, talking directly to Iran. This wasn't just some angry rant anymore. No, this was an open call for murder, a clear, documented piece of evidence that spelled out his dark ideology for everyone to see. But what if he failed? What if he was caught or even killed during the attempt? Did he have a plan B, a failsafe? Well, what prosecutors uncovered was maybe the most disturbing part of this entire plot, a plan to make sure his mission went on even if he didn't. And this right here was the prosecution's ace in the hole, a letter addressed to the world that he left with a friend to be opened only if he was arrested. In it, he essentially passes the torch. He puts a bounty on the former president's head, offering $150,000 to anyone who would finish the job. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was an attempt to franchise his assassination plot, to kick off a chain reaction of violence that he couldn't control. So, in court, the defense tried to paint a picture of a guy who was all talk, that this was more fantasy than a real threat. But for Judge Cannon, the evidence of premeditation was just overwhelming. It built a damning case, piece by piece. Think about it. 12 hours of waiting, that's not just patience, that's dedication, proving intent. Filing off the rifle's serial number, not a mistake, that's criminal preparation. The DIY shield, it showed he was fully expecting a gunfight. And then, the final nail in the coffin, that bounty note. It proved this was a mission he wanted to see continued. Against all that, the defense just fell apart. So, the gavel comes down, the legal case is closed. But the story? Oh, it is far from over. Because an event like this, it isn't just a crime. It's a message. And the ripples from that day on the golf course spread across the globe, raising a really big question. Why does one failed attempt by one guy matter so much on the world stage?
For decades, America has had this self-image, right? The shining city on a hill, a model of stability. Well, this assassination attempt, it was a gift-wrapped piece of propaganda for America's adversaries. State media in places like Russia and Iran jumped on it immediately. For them, this wasn't an isolated crime. It was proof of what they'd been saying all along, that American democracy is broken, chaotic, and, as they put it, cannibalizing itself. One man in the bushes gave them the perfect weapon to broadcast an image of American decline to the whole world.
And beyond the geopolitics, Routh himself represents this terrifying modern-day nightmare for security agencies. He wasn't part of some terror cell. He wasn't taking orders. He's the textbook definition of the lone wolf, an individual radicalized by global events he's watching on a screen, who then decides he and he alone can change history with a rifle. And this creates an almost impossible problem. How in the world do you predict or prevent an attack from someone who has no network, no co-conspirators when the entire plot is happening inside their own head?
The most immediate, most tangible result of what Ralph did is a new, much harder reality for American politics. You can see it every time you turn on the news. Security for major political figures has been beefed up to a level we've just never seen before. Political campaigns, they're not just about shaking hands anymore. They look more like military operations. It's a stark reminder that the threat is real. It's a man who could be waiting for hours in the bushes.
So, as Ryan Routh begins his life sentence, he joins a dark list in American history. But he leaves behind this really, really unsettling question for all of us. Donald Trump was lucky that day. One alert agent made all the difference. But in a country this divided, this fractured, you have to wonder how many others are out there, waiting in the shadows, convinced that violence is the only way. And the real question isn't just about whether we can stop them. It's about whether we can even begin to fix the deep, deep divides in our society that create them in the first place.